all leads back to control. The government controls what we eat, they control what we think, they control what we feel. And then we wake up one day and be like, damn, I got
But isn't that American dream? That American dream is because there's more people that live that type of fucking American reality. But isn't that American dream? That American dream is because there's more people that live that type of fucking American reality. But isn't that American dream? That American dream is because there's more people that live that type of fucking American reality.
QAnon, my futon, hold it up and smoke it. Transgression of progression of a war we ain't asked for. Transgression of progression of a war we ain't asked for.
It's madness, yo. All the things that we could talk about.
Call it.
But let's talk about these urban circumstances real quick.
And basically it's the, and
we got this.
So
revolutionary.
Frosty hand. Muhammad is the famed name, forever stand.
Standing on royal fusing of justice for the few, ridiculed by the pale terrorists bent on genocidal obsession, rooted in fear of neglection and abandonment, fueled by nightmares of ancestors' jealousy.
because at the end of the day, I still want to be able to I don't dislike George Washington.
The kind of friends I think all friends should be like my friends. My friends are the kind of friends I think everyone needs. My friends see the things at times I don't see. My friends hate the police.
What has changed?
Are deemed the criminals, and the blacks are deemed the criminals.
Shut up and help.
Reflection ain't nothing but the inner child trying to see you. You gonna look? You gonna pick up that book?
Lord, keep me far from the faith. Guide me through night and day. Teach me your ways. Show me the righteous way to sway. Lord, can you teach me, please? Show me the way, I'd say. Grand Risings, and welcome back to another episode of the Urban Conservative with Chaz Neal. We're excited to have you join us on this journey of thoughtful discourse and community engagement. The Urban Conservative is proudly sponsored by the Leon Block Network, an organization committed to promoting transparency, truth, and accountability in our media landscape. Here at the Urban Conservative, our mission remains steadfast to bring you the latest news directly from the streets, addressing critical topics such as gun violence, crime, politics, and perhaps most importantly, exploring solutions to the profound challenges our communities face. As we embark on this third season, the focus is clear. It's time to actively contribute to the transformation of our communities for the better. How can we achieve this? The answer lies in a multifaceted approach that starts with reconnecting with our core family values. Strengthening our sense of community is paramount, fostering bonds that transcend the barriers that often divide us. Moreover, it involves embracing our foundational roots, recognizing the historical and cultural threads that weave through the fabric of our society. In this season, we're calling for more than words. We seek action. It's a plea to move beyond mere rhetoric and engage in tangible, impactful initiatives that contribute to positive change. The time for empty words has passed. Now more than ever, we need to put our convictions into action. Together, united by a common purpose, we can make a substantial and lasting difference in the well-being of our communities. So join us on this journey as we explore not only the challenges, but also the opportunities for growth and progress. Together, let's turn our shared vision for stronger, safer, and more connected communities into a reality. Thank you for being a part of the Urban Conservative with Chaz Neal, a platform dedicated to fostering change and making a positive impact on the world around us. Shut up and help. Good morning, good morning, good morning, beautiful people. I, we talk so much about, throughout history, throughout school, we talk about, race. We talk about gender. But we never talk about the fights that, women and Black people had to go through, because all of that is tied up in the 1964 Civil Rights Bill. It was written a certain way that we were led to believe that it was going to make everything equal when it came to our system. But as we see, that's not the way that it was. And as, over time, people have dissected legislation and, words have changed, fights have gotten different. And we start to wonder why, if civil rights, if Black people, if we were being disfranchised as voters, which we were being, and still to this day, and that's what I don't understand is, like, how did all this legislation so-called help us if it's only made it literally the same? You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand that. They have all of this statistics, this data that tells us that America is racist. They tell us that Black people are at the bottom when it comes to wealth, when it comes to home ownership, when it comes to education standards. And yet, we say nothing. We really don't fight back because people will tell us, oh, it just seems like it's that way. It really isn't. Well, what really is and what really isn't? And that's the part that I really start to really ponder and think about because, I look at our elected officials, I look at our community leaders, and then I look inside of our communities. And I got to say, what are these people talking about? Do they actually come down to these communities? Do they actually step outside of their offices? Because I see a lot of legislation that looks good on paper. On paper, yeah, it looks good. But when it actually comes time to implement it, it doesn't work the way that we were told. And I need people to understand that. And a prime example is something that is going on in Minnesota right now. And it has been going on. And I'm glad that, certain people will talk about it, certain people won't. It's about legislation. Nobody should be discriminated against. Let me say this, right? Nobody should be ever feel like they're the odd person out because they see something differently or they feel like there's something different. You know what I mean? Like, you know, because we deal with that with gay, you know, trans, you know, things that we sometimes maybe don't understand, but dislike. You know what I'm saying? And I think about that because I understand. Let me say this: when it comes to uh, the LGBTQ community, right? I will say this is I understand to a degree of, you know, when we sit here and we talk about, um, you know, Jim Crow and slavery, I, I understand, you know what I'm saying? Because growing up in this era and seeing what, you know, some gay people have had to go through, but also still seeing what Black Americans have to go through with lynchings, with being wrongfully convicted, uh, with being demonized, our families being torn apart, and all the while they're writing legislation making it easier for uh, people. And this is the thing, right? I get the whole legislation. You know, people live. You We should be able to live how we want to live, right? Regardless if however you see yourself, right? Um, but I think when it comes to putting things like that in public education, or when it comes to, you know, children being able to uh, make decisions that we grew up thinking or understanding that they were adult decisions. Um, because there's bills right now that I feel like they say on paper it's to protect our kids, right? But and when it comes to implementing it, it's actually going to affect Black people more. It's going to affect poor communities more. You know, with them, because I don't think people understand that there's a bill in the Minnesota legislation right now um, to ban flavored tobacco and menthol cigarettes because they're aimed at, I guess, aimed at kids, at our youth. But I say that how are you going to ban flavored but not get rid of regular? That makes no sense to me. You get what I'm saying? It's like you get rid of one thing because you feel like it's directed at kids, but yet not get rid of, not ban at all. You know, we already have bans in certain areas in Minnesota when it comes to menthol products or, you know, flavored cigars and tobacco and things like that. And I feel like, how does that help? How does that legislation actually help those areas when it comes to, you know, kids smoking? Because all it's doing is people are going outside of their zip code or their county or their city limits to go get it. It's just like with the whole alcohol thing. Everybody they wanted alcohol on Sundays from the liquor store. They drove to Wisconsin. That's exactly how it's always been. They've drove to Wisconsin. Right. And you have a very good point, Ashley. You know, it's always tobacco. What about alcohol? They always want to ban something, yet on paper it looks good. But when it comes time to implement it, it always goes backwards. And I will never understand that. It always goes backwards. Always. And yet we fall for it. We fall for it all the time. Just like with the No Child Left Behind legislation. On paper, that looked great. It looked great on paper, right? But when it was time to implement it, look what happened. We have so many children that are actually being left behind in poor communities. In poor communities. in poor communities. Think about that. Because they always want to talk about the education disparities, but they don't ever want to talk about how we got there. Let's talk about the No Child Left Behind. Right. Thank you. Michael Spencer says, it doesn't help. It is government pretending to do something and always outside of what government is for. Exactly. They say it's for certain things, just like what people don't understand. I put a post in Spotted in Rochester on Facebook about there is a policy in Rochester that when it comes to a child's gender, that the parent doesn't have any say. And if a teacher says something to a parent, they can be fired, terminated. Um, and I feel like, some of the comments on there, on that post, were like some of the parents, like, why do we care what other parents do with their children? If they're not abusing their kids, right? If they are loving, I don't understand that, right? Because we won't even say shit to people that are out here sexually abusing kids, right? We allow programs to keep on going that abuse our children, but yet want to have something to say of what another parent is trying to teach their children. When they are adults, that's fine and dandy. It don't even have to be an adult. You know what I'm saying? Let's lower the age of whatever to 16, but also at least have a conversation with your parents, because we've gotten into a society where, we always say we want transparency and truth, but I start to think people really don't want the truth at all. We don't want the truth, because if it was really about the truth, let's talk about the truth. Let's stop all this pandering, right? Let's stop all this pandering. That's what I don't understand. If this is about reform, if this is about actually changing our communities, then let's make it about that, right? Let's stop rushing this legislation through, and then let's actually listen to the constituents, because it's crazy as hell with how within the last 4 years of Minnesota, right, or just even America, so many certain things that we grew up with are now racist. Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben's, I'm coming to find out that the state flag was racist, but it wasn't racist to the last couple of years, because that's not what they taught us in school. It's not what they taught us in school. So why is it in 2024 that shit is considered racist, but yet in 1986 and above, there was nothing? And I'm just saying, because I was about 9 years old, so I'm trying to think of a grade that's probably like fourth grade, that would have been influential in teaching things, because I never no elder, and when I mean elder, I'm talking about like my grandparents' age, rest in peace, to both Betty and Howard, or not Betty, Letha and Howard. So I'm talking about somebody that is over 100 plus years old, and they never once said anything about the flag being racist. That's not the stories that I understood from the flag. So I don't understand how today, even with, they say when we know better, we do better. Why are people just starting to do better now then, supposedly? If this has always been known, right? Why now? Because at this point, I feel like it's an attack on our history. It's an attack, even with replacing or banning these books that they say is graphic or whatever, because of some certain language, it's part of history. And why do we want to get rid of that? Because of words. Words have evolved over time. Am I right or am I wrong that words have not evolved? Because that's how I understand it, that words have evolved. we've learned that words have evolved. Am I right? I wanted to, before we get into any further, I wanted to play this little short video that explains the Civil Rights Bill of 1964 and really gets, because there's a lot into it that I don't think that we were taught or that was even explained to us in school. So let's get into it.
Second piece of legislation in 20th century U.S. history. Systematic racial prejudice was the greatest stain on America's reputation, and the '64 bill did much to remove it. With its passing, the federal government upheld substantial laws against racial discrimination and paved the way for a full redress of a damaging problem. After the American Civil War and the first Reconstruction, the ex-Confederate states relapsed into segregation. A network of racist fiats termed Jim Crow laws saw that public facilities, washrooms, water fountains, hotels were segregated. The justice system overwhelmingly favored whites, and jobs were limited to the menial. In the South, segregation founded on the separate but equal doctrine established in Plessy v. Ferguson 1898 meant that blacks were confined to second-class status. This was mirrored by de facto segregation in the North. Although not legally inferior, Northern blacks were not able to access good quality housing or jobs. In response, CR advocacy groups were formed throughout the early 20th century. The Big Four were the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, formed in 1909, the Congress of Racial Equality, formed in 1942, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, formed in 1957, and the Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee, formed in 1960. Each lobbied the government, and together they coordinated protests. The federal government did little in response. Southern politicians vetoed any attempts to pass legislation. Blacks didn't have the ability to wield their vote in protest, and the ex-Confederate South was uniformly opposed to racial advancement. President Roosevelt had maintained popularity among low-income blacks with his New Deal policies. And President Truman desegregated the Army in 1948, but little was done to improve the lot of the average black citizen. A few racial incidents, such as the murder of Emmett Till, the aborted registration of Autherine Lucy at Alabama University, and the Montgomery bus boycott, had given the issue some exposure in the North, but ignorance and inertia of modern whites continued to be an issue. In 1954, the separate but equal doctrine was rejected by the Supreme Court in Brown v. Board of Education. Its unanimous ruling that segregated public schools were inherently unequal mandated the federal government to desegregate schools, paving the way for a series of crises that would expose Southern prejudice. The first came in 1957, when President Truman sought to integrate Little Rock High School in Arkansas. He deployed federal troops when Governor Orville Faubus opposed the ruling and ultimately saw that the school was integrated. The trend continued under the Kennedy administration. Throughout the early 1960s, a number of racial crises put pressure on the administration to do something significant. In the Freedom Rides of April 1961, two groups of activists tested the Supreme Court ruling that all interstate travel facilities must be desegregated by riding buses throughout several southern states. They were met in Anniston, Birmingham, and Montgomery by groups of white supremacists. Their buses were burned, and the activists were savagely beaten. There was clear collaboration between the police and the KKK, and the Kennedy administration's actions were limited to damage control. In early 1961, James Meredith, a black World War II veteran, had his application to study at the University of Mississippi rejected purely on racial grounds. The Kennedy administration intervened on Meredith's behalf, but Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett calculated that it was politically impossible for him to accept the ruling. Tensions culminated in a standoff between U.S. Marshals and a racist mob outside the university on September 30th. Nearly 100 marshals were injured, but the administration was credited with calmly fulfilling its promise. JFK had always refused to denounce racist actions in moral terms, taking the position that he was merely following the letter of the law. However, Protests in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963 proved seminal. Project C was a protest designed to provoke a violent reaction from the city's thuggish police commissioner, Eugene Bull Connor. Connor craved publicity and was prepared to use significant force in suppressing the protests. A march on the city hall saw police clash with protesters, many of whom were children. The use of dogs and fire hoses produced horrific scenes that created an international outcry and spawned a sequence of national protests. Introducing legislation was now a viable political proposition. Before Birmingham, the lack of national awareness and feeling for the issue had meant the Southern caucus could dominate discussions of race. But now, JFK had a popular mandate to pursue legislation. This he did, giving a national address that called for legislation because it is right. His unprecedented moral tone committed the federal government to realizing substantive legislation. The legislation itself was remarkably broad. Emulating the 1875 Civil Rights Act, it included a public accommodations Title II, that outlawed discrimination in access to public facilities, as well as reaffirming and protecting the universal right to vote. It also strengthened both the Attorney General's authority to intervene in school desegregation cases and provisions against discrimination in federally funded institutions. JFK was assassinated before the bill could make substantial progress. It had passed the Judiciary Committee, but languished in the Senate Finance Committee, headed by arch-segregationist Harry Byrd. The assassination was initially considered a hammer blow for the cause. Vice President Lyndon Johnson, who was a member of the Southern Caucus, had a poor voting record on civil rights and seemingly didn't have the political security to pursue such a risky initiative. However, Johnson was emotionally committed to advancing civil rights. In his first address to Congress as president, Johnson said, "No memorial oration or eulogy could more eloquently honor President Kennedy's memory than the earliest passage of the Civil Rights Bill for which he fought so long." Johnson recognized that JFK's substantial income tax cut was hampering the Civil Rights Bill's progress. Johnson dislodged the tax bill by promising Harry Byrd that he would bring the national budget in below $100 billion. In doing so, he cleared the way for the Civil Rights Act, which passed the Rules Committee and House of Representatives with relative ease. The Senate was a different story. A Southern bloc of 18 Southern Democrats and one Republican, led by Richard Russell, was resolved to destroy the bill. Using Vice President Hubert Humphrey as a proxy, Johnson cajoled congressmen and senators into backing the bill. He crucially got Everett Dirksen and his votes on side, and in doing so won enough votes to pass a cloture vote. Dirksen was not emotionally committed to civil rights reform, but he was compelled to accept the political necessities that underpinned it, and his vote saw a new supportive majority formed. The bill passed the Senate 77-23 and was signed into law on July 2, 1964. Although the bill didn't produce significant immediate improvements in the lives of Black Americans, it gave the federal government the tools to expunge systemic prejudice. And, along with the 1965 Voting Rights Bill, which reinforced some of the 64 bill's provisions, saw that the federal government was broadly supportive of equality and justice.
So, picture this. 1964, a time when legislation was in the works to address civil rights for African Americans, but in the shadows, a political maneuver was underway attempting to hijack the process by introducing an unexpected twist: sex discrimination. Now you might be wondering why the unexpected pivot to women's rights in the context of racial equality. Well, let's rewind a bit. Enter Howard Smith, a Democratic representative from Virginia with a not-so-hidden agenda. His attempt to get rid of the passage of Title VII, designed to combat racial discrimination, involved linking it with an amendment addressing sex discrimination. The strategy was cunning, preying on the perceived ingenuity of combining race and sex discrimination in a single piece of legislation. But why would anyone resort to such a move? To understand this, we need to grasp the complex resistance that women's rights faced during that era. Unlike the straightforward but threatening resistance against Black discrimination rights, women's rights encountered a unique blend of complexity and humor. The humor, unfortunately, was rooted in disparaging stereotypes and the forlorn surrounding marriage. This legislative sabotage wasn't an isolated incident. History shows us that attempts to derail civil rights bills by introducing seemingly outrageous amendments were a standard practice, from Howard Smith's 1945 effort to kill a Fair Employment Practice Bill to Dwight Rogers' successful but short-lived addition to sex to a similar bill in 1950. These linkages weren't always driven by I hate that I can't say all these damn words. In 1962, James Roosevelt proposed an equal employment opportunity bill covering both race and sex discrimination. However, even this well-intentioned effort faced oppositions from key organizations like the NAACP and government departments. So why does this matter? Understanding this forgotten link is crucial to unraveling the complexes of the civil rights movement and acknowledging the challenges women faced in securing their rights during this pivotal time. But we also can't forget the women's suffrage movement. And that's one thing that, as we go back and learn about history and learn about, different bills, different acts, different executive orders, throughout time, they always look good on paper. They were always explained to us a certain way. But then when it was time to implement it, it always was another route. It was always another direction. And it makes me wonder, how can we ever get to unity, or how can we ever get to transparency when they're always trying to sweep stuff under the rug? I mean, let's be honest here. I know they said that year 2024 was going to be the year of the truth, but damn, can we slow down on the truth a little bit? Because coming to find out that certain shit wasn't real, looking at court transcripts, looking at, video, looking at documentaries and dissecting speeches, and you come to find out a lot of shit. And you look at our leaders who say they're educated. To me, you're indoctrinated. You're not educated, you're indoctrinated. There's a difference. Because you don't never want to, you fight the system a little bit, but not the way that you should. And you know that there's a difference between right and wrong, but choose to straddle that fence. I seen a post, and this is the reason why I say about straddling that fence, because, they said there was going to be budget cuts in Minneapolis. And what are one of the first things that they want to cut? Pre-K, preschool. All I seen, or I could hear when I was reading that was fuck them kids. That's all I could literally hear as I'm reading some of this shit, is fuck them kids. How do people not feel like that when you literally read some of this shit? Because even with some of this legislation, it's funny as hell how, our 12-year-old child can go to the school or to the doctor and be like, you know what? I don't want to be Timmy anymore. Call me Kimmy. But I don't want my parents to know. And as a law in Minnesota, they're not allowed to say anything to parents. You know, and I feel like, how can we as parents help if we are being left out of conversations? But yet, when it's time for them to go on a field trip, they need my signature. Or when it's parent teacher, I gotta be there. You know, I think, and then I'm not against giving children rights. Don't mistake that. But I think giving them the decision and the right to make decisions that should be really later on in life. And I know they say, well, you know, about puberty and blah, 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 this, blah, blah, that. And it's like, I understand all of that as well. I just don't, I don't know, man. I'm not, that's not, yeah, let me get off this because they're gonna be like, this dude is homophobic than a motherfucker. And that's not even my fight, man. But it's like, it's all you see, like literally when it comes to Minnesota politics. It's right now, it's all about this gender affirming care. It's all about immigration. It's all about migrants, this, migrants, that. But I don't see nothing about our goddamn poor ass public education system that is going downhill. I don't see them talking about all the damn homeless people that were already actually over here for years, not just coming across the border. I'm not trying to take jabs at any race, any ethnicity, none of that. I'm just out here, I'm speaking truth. I'm speaking truth. And we have literally seen, this is the thing that I want people to understand, right? Right? Because you hear it coming out of their own mouths. This isn't something that we are literally lying about. These are actually coming out of their own mouths when people are talking to them, is that they have no papers. They're not legally allowed to work in America. So how are they supposed to survive in America? I'm gonna ask that again. If they're not legally allowed to work, right? Because that's why we have the E-certify, right? When you go get a job, they want your birth certificate, they want your license, social security number. But if they don't have that, right, how are they supposed to survive? Why do you think that you have all of these city entities doing all these programs, giving out all this money, like New York, Chicago? Because how are they supposed to survive? And I want people to understand that that's why they're becoming sanctuary cities and states, so that our federal government so Big Brother can't come in there and try to do anything, so that little brother can defy. And it'll be saying that they're fighting the system. You're not fighting the system. What you're doing is fucking over our communities. What you're doing is fucking over our states, because we're giving money to people that are coming over here and aren't taxpayers. But yet we won't even take care of the people that are actually taxpayers. Make that make sense to me. They might be homeless. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a job. Doesn't mean that they aren't getting Social Security. That doesn't mean that they aren't law-abiding citizens. It's just maybe they have drug issues. Maybe they have mental health issues. Maybe they have issues of where they just don't like being around people. Or maybe you just have people that just really want to live like that. And maybe they don't do drugs. They just want to live like that. And yet we judge them because we don't understand them. And at the end of the day, that's how history's gone. When you don't understand something, you judge it. Am I right or am I wrong? Because I feel like it even was like that with Black people. I remember my grandpa telling me that he didn't meet his first Black person until he went to the Army. That man was 18 years old. So if you're not accustomed to something, anything that you read, like in the newspapers, anything that you might see on TV, you're going to believe that's how it is. Because if you don't see it up close and personal, you're going to believe that. But until you experience it for yourself, right? Because what have we been told about Africa growing up? But then, that's not the stories that I hear. Even in Mexico, I've been to Mexico, not to none of the resorts, but I've been to some of the little cities. And I mean, yeah, there's cartels, you have things like that, but they're not all bad. There's just people trying to survive. Just like, it ain't no different than going to Chicago or going to the Bronx or going to Minneapolis. It ain't no different because every city has a bad area. Every city has a poor area. Every city has a so-called ghetto. Even Rochester, Owatonna, Austin. You can't go to even a smaller community and not hear people say that. Oh yeah, this the ghetto of Austin. The fuck do you know about a ghetto? Like, come on, man. Oh, I definitely agree. Parent riots all day. It should be. You know what I'm saying? And that's the one thing that they are trying to do is that's the one thing that people don't understand when it comes to the difference about Democrats and Republicans. Democrats are about government, right? They're about big government. Republicans are about small government. You know, they believe more in our constitutional rights, where the Democrats want to bend and fold them any trying to way they can get it to fit their agenda and their narrative. And don't get me wrong, Republicans do the same thing. They're both the same. You get a quarter, you just whatever side it flips on, heads or tails. So I believe the only way that we're going to overcome this is we the people, like the preamble in the Constitution says. But I wanted to show y'all a video from 1984, which was a while ago. I gotta go to my bookmarks first, because it was really interesting, and I think people are gonna find they're gonna be like, "Damn, how were people saying all of this years ago, but we're not any further?" And it makes you think, like, "Damn, we got to start
vote."
from
And because it didn't get the black, didn't
all right.
the Democratic Party at some point in time has to be shaken out of its racist attitudes. And it has to be during one of these 4-year periods shown that it did not get the black vote. And because it didn't get the black vote, it didn't win the presidency. When that happens, it will change. I don't see any hope of the Republican Party embracing a black agenda at all. The Democratic Party at some point in time has to be shaken out of its racist attitudes. And it has to be during one of these 4-year periods shown that it did not get the black vote. And because it didn't get the black vote, it didn't win the presidency. When that happens, it will change. I don't see any hope of the Republican Party embracing a black agenda at all. The Democratic Party at some point in time has to be shaken.
Brother man makes a very good point that how can we, that's the one thing, right? When people take us for granted, or people take, could really care less about you, what do? They might show you a little appreciation. They might show you, oh, we love you. But when it really comes down to it, they don't really give a fuck about you. Right? So why do we believe in these people? I see, you know, and I think that's what they were trying to do with the uncommitted, which, okay, hands up. But honestly, I'll give you claps for that. But what did y'all really do? Because when it comes down to November, you're going to vote Biden. Let's stop it. You're going to vote for whoever Massa tells you to vote for. Am I right or am I wrong? You guys are just the same way with all of these Republicans that say they're not going to vote Trump. Right? And there is people out there that are saying that, right? You know damn well you are going to go with the Republican choice because you that's how you vote. And we have to get away from that. You know, I sit there and I think about all these people that are one issue voters that vote on immigration or they vote on women's rights, but then will allow for them to discriminate against another marginalized community. And you're okay with that because they're dealing with your issue, right? Because we see that all the time. And honestly, I don't know don't feel like you can say anything more to make people honestly get it. I see there's tons of people out here that, are doing TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, YouTube, Twitch, Kick. But I see the people that talk about bullshit. I see that people that talk about dumbing your asses down and, doing skits or 20 versus 1 or, pretending to be in jail for a week. That shit gets views. But when it's time to educating on how we can better our communities, motherfuckers don't listen. People don't listen because this shit doesn't sell, right? Just like of how when it comes to music, if it's not talking about killing, if it's not talking about some wet ass pussy or some bitch twerking or I got a fat ass booty and then some big old boobs and some big lips, that shit ain't selling. Let's be honest. That shit ain't selling. Just like with movies, if we ain't out here seeing killing and drugs and sex, that shit ain't selling. Because movies that literally have a message, have a meaning, and will try to educate, it doesn't do shit in the movie theaters. Because we don't care about that type of shit. We care more about drama. We care more about keeping up with the Joneses than educating ourselves. We care more about what other people think than just having self-pride. Then shouldn't care what anybody thinks because everybody's got an opinion. And everybody's got one. And it's crazy. They might have multiple opinions about something. So why do you care? Love yourself. Fuck what anybody else thinks because there's no legislation that's ever going to get you to be accepted. Where I'm finding that out as being a black man. It doesn't matter what type of legislation these people write. People are always going to hate black people. Right? All I care about is that history, my black history about my ancestors, about Willie Francis, about the move bombing. I just want the truth about my struggle, my ancestors' struggle. Regardless, I know it's ugly. I know it's fucked up, right? And what's crazy is how I know it's fucked up is y'all literally killed my uncle who was innocent. Y'all executed him not once, but twice. You stole farmland from my family down in Louisiana. And the Francis family wasn't the only family that in Louisiana that got their shit took. There was multiple families in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. Yeah. That's the one part, it trips me out when motherfuckers want to bring up that there was black slaves. There was black slave owners. But they don't ever want to bring up that shit that got took from them, right? They were indentured. They didn't own it. That's what the part that they never want to put it all out there. They just want to put it out a narrative and for people to run with it. It's crazy as hell to me. That's why I'm saying why can't we just have the truth so that people can't even just fucking argue over? We're arguing over a comprehension and how people perceive the shit instead of arguing over facts. All right, that's the whole crazy thing of it is. The world is so fucked up. That's why I say if people literally just use, and that's why I tell people to use artificial intelligence, but for the right things. Educate yourself. Because I'll tell you right now that, and I know they say, well, ChatGPT is kind of whatever. No, it's not. It's all on how you use it. It's all on how you play with it. Because I'll tell you right now, I use chat like it's a real person. Like I have conversations. I have convos. You know what I'm saying? Like literally, I don't know how many times me and chat has talked about the 1964 Civil Rights Bill and what went wrong, right? All the acts that I've heard people talk about. You know what I'm saying? Like, what has gone wrong? If we literally know, why aren't we doing anything? Why isn't it because it's never intended. And I understand that now, right? I understand that Black people can't be racist, because how can we be racist when we don't have anything, right? We don't have anything. We have what, 1% of the wealth in America? 3%, I think it is. And it's only getting smaller by the year. Because we don't have no Black Wall Streets. We don't have those Black Power, Black Panther organizations that were out here teaching about groupnomics and powernomics, because we don't get behind people like Dr. Claud Anderson, right? Because we'd rather shit on their name. Because I don't see Tariq. I don't see none of the big reparationists talking about Dr. Claud Anderson and his plan for reparations. I don't see people talking about that, right? Because that man had a plan years ago, and years ago had a plan, right? But yet we're out here boosting Ice Cube's platinum plan for Black people. Now I see people boosting Trump's platinum plan for Black Americans. What about Dr. Claud Anderson's plan for Black Americans, right? Because I see his vision when you literally think about it, because it is a multifaceted approach. It's not just about going at the government, right? It's also going at these private entities, these corporations that profited and still today profit off that shit, right? Because it's not just a one blame game. There's a lot of people in that dark history, right, that profited off of free labor. All right. No, you're right. And that's the one thing that we really have to look at, is the way that I see it is when you read Dr. Claud Anderson's plan for reparations, and because I just played it yesterday, the way that he breaks it down of going at private corporations, because there's right now what's crazy is there's a list, right? And hold on, let me find this list real quick, because I knew about most of them anyways. Of course, crazy. Let's see, where did I share that yesterday? Okay, so you have New York Life Insurance, their historical connection, its predecessor, Nautilus Insurance Company, sold slaveholder policies in the mid-1800s. They acknowledged involvement in profiting from the institution of slavery. Tiffany and Company, a historical connection, originally financed with profits from a Connecticut cotton mill, which operated using cotton picked by slaves. And what they have done, they recognize ties to slavery through its funding source. You have a TINA, which is an insurance company, insured the lives of slaves during the 1850s and reimbursed slave owners when their slaves died. Impact, direct involvement in the insurance industry linked to the exploitation of enslaved individuals. Brooks Brothers, historical connection, started by selling clothes for slaves to slave traders in the 1800s. Impact established its foundation through the commerce to slave-related products. Norfolk Southern, historical connection, two constituent companies, Mobile and Girard in the central of Georgia, had ties to slavery, directly linked to the transportation of slaves and the rental of enslaved labor. Bank of America, historical connection, predecessor banks, Boatman Savings Institution, and Southern Bank of St. Louis had ties to slavery. acknowledge connections to the institution of slavery with accepted slaves as collateral on loans. Damn, that's cold as hell. USA Today, historical connection, parent company EW Scripps and Gannett linked to the slave trade. Impact shared its historical connection with the slave trade through its parent companies. Wachovia, historical connection, institutions that became part of Wachovia, like Georgia Railroad and Banking Company, owned or accepted slaves as collateral on mortgage, property, or loans. Damn. Wow. Direct ties to the economic aspects of slavery through financial dealings. American International Group, historical connection. AIG purchased American General Financial, which owns U.S. life insurance company, revealing ties to ensuring the lives of slaves. Acknowledged involvement in the insurance industry connected to slavery. You also have J.P. Morgan and Chase Bank, historical connection. Predecessor bank, Citizens Bank and Canal Bank in Louisiana, accepted approximately 13,000 slaves as loan collateral. Acknowledged historical involvement in accepting slaves as collateral and seizing them when plantation owners defaulted on loans. You know what's crazy? I wanted to add a repo service for slaves back in the day. I wanted to add a repo. You could just call a repo man. Like, hey, like, you know how you can go call a repo man now to go get your car? I wanted to add a repo. Yeah, they did, because that's what police officers, slave catchers. But y'all ain't ready for that conversation. You're not ready for that conversation. You're not. And I'm not honestly trying to bring it there, because at the end of the day, I'm not about abolishing police. I am about reimagining public safety, though, where it's everybody involved, not just law enforcement, but it's community enforcement, right? We still have laws. We still have a judicial system. But if we're all community members, why can't we just love thy neighbor? Why can't we just all come together? Because it shouldn't be disputes or some petty ass beef over some territory you niggas don't even own, or getting mad because a nigga got some British Knights on, or he's calling you a Vicky Lou or a crab or a slob or a glazed donut. Like, come on. We bigger than that, B. Or a nigga stepped on your J's. Or you don't like the way a nigga talk to you. Like, come on, man. Hey, we too old for that shit. Really? Everything that I literally just said, that you'll wake up tomorrow feeling A-okay. A nigga might talk about you, but again, that's words. A nigga's opinion. Why do you care about somebody's opinion? You should only care about the people's opinion that you love, and they love you, right? Because it's a two-way fucking street. Y'all niggas out here more worried about love without the loyalty, right? That's what because everybody can love you, but are they loyal to you? And I honestly, these streets ain't loyal. That's the one thing that I'll tell you right now. The streets might love you, but are the streets loyal to you? And people really need to think about that, because I understand that now. I don't give a fuck about the streets loving me. I really never did. Because I always knew that shit was dangerous. I always knew that shit would could come back and bite you in the ass if you don't do it the right way. Right? Or if you got too big for your britches. Because it was always a dirty game. Just like this political shit. Right? Because once you don't agree with somebody, they get to the slander. Right? And I will never understand that, because that's the one crazy thing for me, is how we get mad over words but not actions, especially when it comes with inside our own communities, right? Because here's the crazy thing is, we'll allow niggas to walk around being level 3 sex offenders, knowing that they rape little kids and all it is, knowing they have fetish behaviors when it comes to the women and doing shit like that, right? But let a nigga call you a bitch, and y'all won't even let that nigga around in your neighborhood. But y'all will sit there and allow child predator, right? You'll literally allow people that prey on kids all because they might buy their dope from you, right? And then what's crazy is I think about these women out here. Y'all will literally be sleeping with individuals that are out here sleeping with men and be okay with it, even though maybe you're not. Maybe you don't know about it. Maybe they say they know. It is what it is. But it just really trips me out. But we never get mad over the actions. It's always the words. And it makes me just really wonder, like, what the fuck do people really, because I understand that stand for something or fall for anything. Because I see people just falling for anything because the 1 minute something is hot. Because what makes me wonder is, like, George Floyd woke up a lot of people, right? When is the next name going to wake up some more people? Like, when are we going to stop being silent? When are we going to stop being complacent? When are we going to stop being complicit, right? Because we always talk about that silence equals violence, right? Our riot is the language of the unheard, right? We like to say all these are by any means necessary. But what are we really doing? Because here's my question, because I really wonder, what if Twitter goes down, right? What if we don't have no internet? How are you going to get a hold of your favorite influencer, content creator, your favorite activist? See, that's how I know people aren't connected to reality, because none of this shit is going to make a difference up here. It's going to make a difference of going to City Hall, right? Going to the state capitol, because this virtual reality shit doesn't really matter. You guys we should use it to benefit, to get out a message, because this shit is being heard. You know what's crazy is I sit there and I look at where my podcast is being listened to. Because I'm on different platforms. I'm on Spotify. I'm on Pandora. And it's crazy when I see people from, like, all over the world that listen. Ireland, Germany, UK, different parts of Africa, Asia. And it just astonishes me. It's like, damn. They're like, there's a whole big fucking world out there. And that's why I listen to other podcasts from other countries to understand what's going on in their neck of the woods. Because it's what the media tells us. It should be bogus, be lies, man. It should be fake. Oh yeah, I will say this, Michael. Derek Chauvin didn't kill George Floyd. Was George a chronic drug addict? Yes. That's just the raw truth. Was he a criminal? Yes, he had a history of he had a criminal record. I won't go with agree with the who victimized anybody he could, because that's not the stories that I heard about George. And I talked to plenty of people that didn't go to the media who talked about George, who just wanted to remember George as it was. So I can't agree with that. I think when, George was on drugs, he was a different person, like most people are. And that's sad to see. It's sad to see that there's people that say they cared about George, but now really only cared that he's, gone and no longer living. You know what I'm saying? And we'll never be able to hear George's part of the story because he's no longer here. So I will say that from what I've seen and what I know about that, Minneapolis Police Department killed George Floyd. That's what happened. Wasn't an OD. I believe it was an OD. What I know about fentanyl now, and that we'll never know if it was illicit fentanyl or if it was fentanyl that you get from a pharmacy. So, and that's things that they don't want to talk about. And I'm not on here to talk about conspiracy theories or, thing like that, because it's not a conspiracy theory. It's actual the truth. When you ask these people these types of questions, they don't have any answers, right? Because you literally, I don't know how many times I've asked this, because they'll tell you that there's 2 different types of fentanyl, but they won't tell you, they'll honestly tell you, well, we don't know what type of fentanyl that was, because they didn't test it. There is tests to see if it is pharmaceutical or illicit fentanyl. They don't do the testing like that unless it is ordered, and that's usually when an OD happens, to see what type of fentanyl that it was. But y'all don't want to have these type of conversations. You don't want this type of knowledge because they don't want you to know either. That's the whole kick of it. They don't want you to know because they'll tell you that, oh, you can't smoke fentanyl. That's a fucking lie. Well, you think these people out here, all this tinfoil all over America? Fuck out of here. The fuck you think all that popcorn, burnt popcorn smell is that you smell? That's fentanyl, nigga. The fuck? That's how I know people ain't paying attention. What do you think if you smell on them trains and you smell popcorn? Nigga ain't got no microwave on the train or on the bus. Name me a bus, a public bus, right? And I'm not talking about Jefferson Lines. I'm not talking about Greyhound. I'm not talking about none of them other buses that even, I'm not even talking about the migrant buses. I'm talking about public bus, city buses, right? That you go to and from work, appointments, to the mall. Should be smelling like burnt popcorn because ain't no microwaves on that bitch. Right. Just like why our kids are overdosing, because we would rather dope them up on medications. That's why they're ODing on shit that looks like Xanax. A shit that looks like Adderall, right? That looks like the meds that they take on a daily basis. The schools either told them that we have to put them on it, right? Or they tell them that all because of the simple fact, well, he's ADHD. He's a behavioral issue. He doesn't sit straight in school, doesn't do that. Well, maybe your shit's a little bit boring, buddy. Don't just pep it up a little bit. Instead of maybe seeing that the kid is disinterested because it's just not fun to him. So why not, let's make it a little fun. Let's make it a little humorous. Let's get the kids involved into things that they do outside of school and bring it in. And I know that I understand they're trying to do that a little bit, but maybe y'all need to do it a little bit more instead of calling these kids ADHD or they have anger issues. Well, first of all, most of the time, why they have anger issues is because they don't know how to deal with their emotions, because most people don't listen to them because they're kids, right? I've done the same thing to my kids. You know what I'm saying? Instead of just looking at the shit for what it really was, I'm sitting there trying to, and that's the problem, right? Instead of just fully listening and trying to understand why it fully happened, because I've had to do that with my kids now. And then I see, especially when it comes to one of my sons, I've started to understand that, yeah, he probably does play a little bit part into what happens, but the other people always take it above and beyond. And then because, he likes to start things, well, people just never usually, because they'll be like, oh, well, you did start, you started it. But that doesn't make it okay that other people take it above and beyond. And I had to realize that, okay, yeah, he might have started it, but he wanted it to stop, and they kept going. So yeah, that is a part of, bullying. Even when it comes to peer pressure, I've had to tell my daughter, there is no such thing as peer pressure. That's a word that they want us to believe, right? Because to me, that gives you that victim mentality that you don't have to sit here and take accountability for your actions, right? Because it all comes down to a choice. You have yes, you have no. Doesn't matter what the next motherfucker says. Because at the end of the day, if you don't want to do something, you shouldn't do it. Don't sit there and say, because, oh, my friends wanted me to do this, my friends wanted me to do that. No, that's pussy shit. Buck up and face your responsibilities, right? Because you made a choice. You could have sat there and who cared? They would have called you lame, right? Who cares? That's what people don't understand. And that's what I will never understand, is that we would rather let our kids and our society be victims, that victim mentality, instead of owning up to their shit and realizing that, you know what? I did make a choice, right? I did, because there's plenty of times that I've sat here as a younger Chaz, played that victim mentality shit. Instead of just sitting there owning my shit, I wanted to blame everybody else but Chaz. I wanted to blame it on the system. I wanted to blame my mom, right? My mom didn't do none of that. The system, they might have had their help in it, but at the end of the day, it was still me to make a choice. I had to make a choice, just like now, today, in today's time, right? Just like in today's time, I could literally sit there and go and I want people to notice, because this isn't no bullshit. I could literally go work for a nonprofit, right? To do volunteer work, or maybe even probably a paid position, because I've done it before. But see, I don't agree with a lot of the nonprofits. I don't agree with a lot of the organizations that say they fight this fight, because they're not fighting anything. They're running in circles. They're not confronting shit. Because until they confront looking in the mirror first, then we can get somewhere. Because at the end of the day, all these people are doing is running around. That's why they're okay. Yeah, I ain't gonna go there. But wearing masks. That's all it is, because it's a facade. It's a certain personality they got to keep up with. Let's keep it 100. This isn't about change. This isn't about making it better, because at the end of the day, if it was, we would already have it, because violence pays, sexual assault pays, human trafficking pays. That's why those things will never go away. Having a fucked up public education system pays, because they can always tell you that we need more money, it'll get better. No, it's a fucking lie. Come on, wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Do people not see what they're doing? Do people not see what they're doing? That's all I want people to just, and it doesn't matter where you live. It could be Philadelphia. This is just okay. Here's a damn good example. There was a mass shooting, I believe, yesterday in Philadelphia. Last night, Meek Mill makes a post on Twitter saying that he wants to work with the city to curb gun violence. Nigga, where you been for the last 8 years since the shit's gotten out of hand? Now you want to come out in the streets? That's that clout chasing ass bullshit, because he wasn't behind the people that are already out there, boots to the ground every night during the last summer. I literally interviewed a man to stop the killing us, right, guy? Interviewed, he's from Philadelphia, been out there fighting gun violence. I don't hear Meek coming out there with him when they were on the block at night during demon time, because you know what? He'd rather be at the club popping bottles. These niggas ain't serious about that shit. None of them, because they don't really want to be out there in them trenches. They don't want to be out there in demon time, because at the end of the day, they know what happens out there. So I'm going to keep it a buck. They don't want to be out there. And they won't tell you that, but I'm going to tell you that. That's why them programs, those violence interrupters, there ain't none of them that be out there during demon time. And if you don't know what demon time is, look it up. That's 8 to 3 in the morning. That's when Black Lives the Streets was out there. And you've seen we had the best numbers out of any group that was on them boots on the ground in Minneapolis. That summer of 2021, we curbed violence 68% in our area on 36th and Penn. And you know who they shut out? Us. That group that was actually making the difference was left out of the table, right? Was shut out because we made that showed me right there that they didn't care. Even when it came to the legislation, when they wanted to put pussyfooting words in there, right? And when they wanted to water it down so that it actually really didn't do shit, that's when I knew they were nothing but dirty fucking liars. That's when I knew. And it's crazy, but then it's like, damn, okay, I know I'm not voting for the Democrats, but then I got to sit here and listen to some of these weirdos on the Republican side and be like, damn, I got to go that way. It's fucked up when you only live in a two-party system, or when you don't have people that run, right? Or we get stuck with certain people. Because not everybody wants to run for politics, but there is people that want out here that make a difference. And it's crazy because it's like, how can you make a difference? But then going into that system, because there is people that I honestly believe that are Democrats, under the Democratic Party, that actually want change, and I do believe them. But because of the simple fact of the system that the establishment the political party, I just can't believe it. Because if you're not calling out your colleagues, how can I believe that you're going to go in private and fight? And that's what I want people to understand when it comes to VTOL, when it comes to Ellison, when it comes to Bobby Champion, Cedric Frazier, any of our Black leaders. You guys are so quick to say that you're with us, but you never call your colleagues, right? You never call them out. You never call them out for doing wrong, for doing unethical shit. You don't ever. So I want to thank people for listening this morning. I will say this, is that I see my numbers going up, and I really want to thank people because I literally do appreciate it. And it is, I'm noticing it. I am noticing it, and I do want to thank you because it does matter to me. I'll say this, is that I don't do this for likes. I don't get paid to do this. I don't do this for follows. I want to collaborate and connect with others that are like-minded, who want to make change in their communities, and how we can do it together. Because it's I'll tell you this, that an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere, right? So doesn't matter if I'm living good, because if we're not all living good, it doesn't matter, because I want everybody to live good. So that's why we have to start connecting and collaborating with everybody everywhere, so that we can all feel it and we can all have the same goals. We can all have the same game plan, so that it's the same everywhere. It's going to take us, though. It's going to take a village. So that's what I'm on, man, because I know that I can't do this alone, right? I know that if you're sitting in Illinois right now, if you're sitting in Atlanta or Georgia, if you're sitting in New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, Rhode Island, Vermont, New Hampshire, I know that you're sitting there thinking like, damn, I know I can't do this myself, but how can I do it, right? Because I know that there's people everywhere across this country right now that are literally sitting down. Maybe some are sleeping, maybe some are eating breakfast, maybe some are at work, school, but they're sitting there thinking in the back of their mind, like, how the fuck am I going to do this with such opposition? And there's not many of us. But then the ones that say they're with me, they really not, because when it's time to come out, or when it's time to actually make a difference, they're not there. They don't show up, right? And that's what we need. We need people. Oh, sorry. Hold up. My bad. I got a message. So, religious people, our extremist churches are supposed to be. Well, what? Oh, wow. That's crazy. Wow. Damn, that's crazy. See, man, I'm telling you right now, Minnesota's so fucked, man. And I will tell you like this, that Rep. Andy Smith, you live in my area. You live in the Rochester area. So definitely know that I'm going to be, and that's that. I want people to know what I'm talking about right now is the Equal Rights Amendment that they're trying to do in Minnesota, right? We don't need another one. So I don't understand this shit. People really need to fucking pay attention because at the end of the day, we're literally going to have it where it's all fucked up, not only in our school systems, but in our churches, in our malls, everywhere. Like, come on now, people. Come on now. Like, when we're infringing on religious rights and doing all that and forcing other people to go against their beliefs, that's fucked up. And that's what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow. So I'm going to get off here. I got some things to do. Can't put it all out here because, you know, the enemy always watching, even though they say they ain't, they are. I know they are. So I hope everybody has a great Thursday. I hope that everybody is rejoicing. I hope everybody is getting out and doing something. Watch the Minnesota legislative session that is going on. If you live anywhere that the legislative session is going on, pay attention because now is the time. We're in an election year. We need to make that change now. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? Win or fail, freedom or jail, heaven or hell, wish me well. Y'all have a great one. I'm the Urban Conservative. The Urban Conservative.